service, man.
Closet otherwise, so
and we're live. I think that went over the wire, by the way.
Yeah, it's okay. Everybody asks me, what is Soder's purpose on the show, and I say just to look pretty and make sure things work. So uh-oh, is that you? Is that your dog?
That was my dog. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh man, we haven't met the dog yet, so we'll have to meet.
I've got. Are we on right now? Are we live?
We are. We're live. We're live.
Yeah, so I do have to tell a dog story since we got a dog last August at the gun show down here, and it's a Labradoodle, and we have a standard poodle as well. And we had our new puppy scheduled to be fixed in March, and all canceled the elective surgeries. And so about a week after the surgery where he was supposed to be fixed, my daughter was screaming from downstairs because the dogs were stuck together. So, we had 10 Labradoodle puppies.
Well, wouldn't that be a Labradoodle doodle?
That's a Labradoodle doodle. Yeah, they're like 7/8 poodle and 1/8 lab.
Oh boy!
So we've been having people buy our Labradoodles, and
fantastic.
Crazy. It's been a crazy time raising all these puppies.
Don't mean to reading too much into this, but are they black?
They are all colors. We have
really. So we had
two blonde, two like yellow, 3 brown, and then the rest black.
That's cool. So I think I see is the poodle black?
The poodle, actually, both are actually called blue. So they're mostly black with a little gray and brown mixed in.
I thought I saw a standard poodle running around behind you out there on the farm. So,
they looks black. Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, it's dark out there, but cool beans, man. Well, thank you for coming. And sorry if you guys don't know where you're at. You are in Out of the Darkness. This is your host Q, your humble civil servant. And we got Soder here, and we were lucky and blessed enough to have state representative here in Minnesota, Jeremy Munson, Esquire. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
It's fantastic. Man, we're going through some things, man. I was supposed to be on vacation this week, but I'm originally from Texas, you know that, and I think we've talked about that before. And unfortunately, the governor of Texas put in a mask order requiring everyone out in public to wear a mask. And I just said, I don't take time off of work very often. I mean, I'm pretty, well, Soder can tell you, I stay pretty busy. If I'm going to take,
yes, he does. If
I'm going to take 2 weeks off of work, it's not going to be so I can sit around and wear a mask in 102-degree weather with 80% humidity. And only be able to go to half the restaurants that I want to. And even if I can get to those, I've got to order out. So I figured I'll save my vacation and go when all this madness finally comes to an end. So, but yeah, so let's just jump into it. I know it's getting a little late for you guys. Now, did y'all I know y'all had the big, what do you call it? The Tater Days parade?
Yeah, well, we had the Tater Days parade yesterday at noon, and then I had a huge party called Freedom Fest out at a farm site near my place, and we had 250 to 275 people came out. We had a band, food trucks. We had a great time.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So it sounds like a whole lot of fun. We've been following you and my wife. So let me say this. My wife never watches the show. She does not. ever watch Out of the Darkness. She'll listen in every once in a while, but to watch it live, she just doesn't do it. And tonight she says she follows you on Facebook. She says you need to get Jeremy Munson on the show. You got to get Jeremy Munson on. And I said, well, tonight might actually be a great time to have him on to talk about some of this madness we got going on. And she says, oh yeah, he's been talking about this stuff a lot. You need to get him on. So, so I can't get my wife to watch, but you can. I'm not sure exactly what to make of that, but
it sounds like a personal issue.
Maybe we need to get Drex here to analyze it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's all right. So, well, welcome. So let's talk about this a little bit, because I feel like Governor Walz, and this is just my own personal idea or feeling, so I'm not going to project this on you, but I feel like he's more of a follower than a leader. It seems as though he throughout this entire thing that he's taken his cues from other states. And unfortunately, rather than being more like South Dakota and North Dakota, he's chosen the more liberal states around us to follow. And unfortunately, I don't feel like that's sitting very well, at least out here in rural Minnesota. It doesn't seem to be sitting well with the people. But now we're in a place where we see a lot of other states that are essentially holding schools hostage, holding public servants hostage, saying we're not going to do these things until, or whatever it is they're doing, going back to school, teachers union saying we're not coming back to school unless you, I know in LA's situation, until you make Medicare for all a thing, until you give us legal immigration, and this long list of demands, things that have absolutely nothing to do with education, that we're not coming back until you do those things. And that's dangerous, in my opinion. That's super, super dangerous for us to get into a position where we start allowing these unions to essentially hold us hostage and say, until you do what we ask you to do, we're not going to follow through on and give you what you've paid for in your tax dollars, right? But it seems as though we're in a similar situation here. So I'm going to just kind of turn the floor over to you. Where are we at right now? Where are we at right now in the state of Minnesota? And understand, I know a lot of people that are here are not necessarily from Minnesota, but this isn't just Minnesota we're talking about. This is relevant to the entire country, because every single state is dealing with similar situations where governors are overstepping their powers. I just told you, hey, if the state of Texas, if they can do it there, I mean, no state is safe as far as I'm concerned. So, so just kind of give us just give us a synopsis of where we're at right now.
Okay. Well, I think every state in the union, almost every state, is dealing with a constitutional crisis where, our states' constitutions and the federal constitution requires a separation of powers and a balance of power. So each branch of government is, a co-equal, as a check on each other. And we don't have that right now, because we have the executive branches in most states that are unilaterally writing laws. They're basically usurping the legislature, and in some places, the courts. And that's what we found in Minnesota, where the executive orders that the governor's been writing are not subject to judicial review. So we lost a lawsuit where they were challenging those executive orders in court, and the judicial branch said, well, we really don't have review on it. It has to be, vetoed with the legislature. And the legislature, because it has an opportunity to, if both the House and Senate choose to end the peacetime emergency, that's the only way we can end these executive orders. But that is a legislative veto, and the U.S. Supreme Court has found that legislative vetoes are unconstitutional. When Congress tried to do this, and that Supreme Court decision has been used 15 subsequent times to overturn legislative vetoes. And so, we can't have we have the legislature that writes laws, and then the governor chooses to sign them or veto them. Can't have the governor write laws and then have the legislature veto them. That defeats the purpose of having the legislature. So that we really have a constitutional crisis where we need to have the other two branches of government, the legislature and the judicial branch, to check the governor's power. And that's what our lawsuit is about, is trying to restore balance of power in our state, and then with it, of course, freedom for everyone.
Well, we certainly applaud you and we appreciate you guys doing that, because Soder and I have both been kind of screaming about this for months now, that we've got to hold the executive branch in check. We've got to, both on, I mean, and that's across the board, whether it be state, whether it be federal. I mean, there's a fantastic method put in place in order to ensure that we have co-equal branches, and unfortunately right now we're way out of whack, like you said. So you guys are essentially suing the executive branch, correct?
Yep. I'm suing the governor. Yeah.
Correct. In an effort to, what do you want to see? What is the goal in this lawsuit?
Well, the goal of the lawsuit is to declare that Chapter 12.31, which is the governor's, where he derives his peacetime emergency powers from. We want the judicial the courts to find that chapter of law to be unconstitutional, because there's a non-delegation doctrine that says that you can't, as one branch of government, delegate your authority to another. So the legislature, it's not just that the governor is taking these powers that he shouldn't. It's that the legislature should never have given up their authority in the first place to the governor. And so it basically means that the legislature can't be stupid and give up their powers. So we hope the courts will find that this chapter of law, although the governor may be, even if the governor thinks he's following the law correctly, the law itself is unconstitutional and they'll throw it out. If not for the non-delegation doctrine, the legislative veto that's written in law, if that's unconstitutional, we hope that the courts won't find that provision to be severable or to be taken away from the other chapter of law, because the legislature would never give the governor unilateral lawmaking authority without having any checks on that power. But we think the legislative veto is such a weak check that it should be unconstitutional as well, and they'll hopefully throw out the whole peacetime emergency powers. Now, the 12.31 says that a peacetime declaration of emergency may be declared only when an act of nature, a technological failure or malfunction, or a terrorist incident, or an industrial accident, or hazardous materials accident, or a civil disturbance endangers life and property, and the local government doesn't have the resources to handle it. Now, the governor is saying that he's declaring this peacetime emergency because it's an act of nature. He's calling a virus an act of nature. When these powers were decided, it was after Hurricane Katrina, when we talked about floods and fires and some real form of natural disaster. Not that a virus would be an act of nature that would be here for years.
So let me ask this. So, to my understanding, these emergency peacetime powers are supposed to be a very temporary thing as well. And we're entering almost 4 months, correct?
Yes.
So when does it end? I mean, shouldn't there be an end in sight? I mean, isn't it 30 days, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah. I mean, it's at 30 days. The legislature can then, so let me just get back up. So the governor declares that he's taking this authority. He declares an emergency. He takes the powers to write laws. Within 5 days, his executive council must positively affirm his powers, meaning they have to vote, yes, you may have these powers. But his executive council is the lieutenant governor, secretary of state, the attorney general, the state auditor, I think, is in there. So those people have to say yes. So that's, of course, his inside counsel. They're going to approve it. And then at 30 days, the legislature has to come into special session if they're not in session, and then have an opportunity to end the peacetime emergency. But both must vote yes, or both must vote to end his powers. Otherwise, it continues. Now, what's a really glaring omission from this law is that the governor could, at day 29, say, I'm ending the peacetime emergency powers. All of my executive orders have to be canceled. And then a minute later, he could issue another emergency declaration and write the same emergency orders, and they would go another 29 days. So he could actually go around the legislature and keep these forever.
Wow. Wow. Well, good on you for attempting to at least rein this in, so
Yeah.
that we can once again have a truly representative form of government. So let's kind of dive into what's going on this week. I call it extortion, because that's what it feels like to me. Um, the governor is keeping the the mask order in his back pocket. I guess you would say he's been kind of threatening that for well, almost a month now. And in addition to that, which is interesting to me, that he believes that mask will save lives, but when there was never any encouragement to wear masks during the riots in the cities. Not once did I hear him say, "Hey, if you're going to be out there rioting and looting and protesting, please make sure you wear masks so you don't spread this thing." But anyway, that's just my own personal frustration. But then he comes back and he says, well, he wants this bonding bill, and so he might be willing to step back his emergency peacetime orders, and also take the bond the if I'm not mistaken, I think he also said the take off the table the mask order in exchange for a bonding bill. What am I missing about that? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Is that he's got his stick. He's got the mask mandate as his stick. He did have a carrot. He said that he might be willing to give up 20 or 30 of his executive orders in exchange for bonding bill and maybe a mask mandate. I mean, he's definitely horse trading with public health policy and debt. He
Wow.
wants more debt for the state, more spending, and in exchange for maybe giving up some of his emergency powers or executive orders. And it's
Well,
just
it wouldn't really be
he,
debt, because we have a pretty large, substantial surplus in the state of Minnesota, don't
no,
we? We did. As of
we
March,
did.
it was
Well,
millions of dollars.
we did have an actual hundreds of millions of dollars of surplus and a projected uh, $1 billion surplus to be captured over the next until June 30th of next year. But obviously, when you take $40 billion of revenue out of the state by shutting businesses down, that those businesses aren't paying taxes. So we're going to have a huge deficit. And on top of it, it looks like tomorrow we'll be voting on the largest bonding bill in Minnesota state history. So,
So real quick, for those that are here that don't know what a bonding bill, please explain uh, to us, what is a bonding bill?
well, it is basically a credit card for the state of Minnesota, where we're going to, in our budget, we're going to save $300 million of spending, and that's the minimum payment due on a credit card for billions of dollars. And so basically a lot of the bonding spending money goes to roads and bridges, goes to wastewater infrastructure projects, and then maintaining the state's buildings. So colleges and universities, things like that. The problem is the bonding bill needs a supermajority of votes from the House and Senate to pass. That means you need to have both parties come together with an agreement on how to spend that. And instead of just putting money into the transportation budget, which follows a formula and determines which priorities get done first based on road degradation and need and all that kind of stuff, people start earmarking projects. I want Highway 12 done. I want Highway 68 done. And then they start earmarking non-essential projects above the important ones, and it becomes a pork fest where people just start, buying votes and throwing money at a district. Legislators that are in tough reelection campaigns in the majority will get projects in their district that aren't really a priority, and it becomes this ballooned pork bill, and that's really what the bonding bill turns into.
And so, how large of a bonding bill are you guys voting on then?
Well, it's going to be probably close to $2 billion with all of the extra cash projects that are in that bill. So, and
Wow.
it'll be paid over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. But you elect legislators for 2 years or 4 years, and then they're going to be locking us into spending, putting another, maxing out another credit card. Now, the debt service payments on previous bonding bills are about $1.8 billion. So we're going to go out and spend $1.8 billion more and max out another credit card. But our minimum payment dues on all the other credit cards we've had are about what we're going to spend in bonding.
So I'm floored at all this, trying to make sense of it. So, um, how does this work? How do we do this, and still meet our? I mean, wouldn't there have to be an increase in taxes at some point or another? I mean, you can't continue. I mean, you can't continue to spend money without making more money, and the government doesn't have any money. All it has is the ability to take from its citizenry. So, um, how does that work?
Well, we have a requirement that we have a balanced budget, so we can't spend any more in the fiscal biennium or those 2 year budget period than we actually take in. So we do forecasts all the time, and then when we come up with shortfalls like we have now, we're going to have to figure out how to cut that. So when we come into session next January, which is the beginning of the long session during a budget year, we're going to have to quickly make corrections for the last 5 months of the budget period in order to not go into debt. I mean, we're basically not shut government down. So we need to make significant cuts in spending. That's usually going to come out of Health and Human Services, which is responsible for about 42% of our spending in the state, or education, which is kind of a no-go when the Democrats are in the majority. But we got to figure it out. But we shouldn't be spending significantly more now.
Wow. So again, I call it extortion. It's probably
Yeah.
a little bit stronger, too strong of a word, but
Let me add to this really bad deal. When you start negotiating, I know that the governor is saying that he will end some of his executive orders in exchange for a bonding bill. Well, if you agree to that, and as soon as the governor signs the bonding bill into law, before he puts the pen down, he can issue those same executive orders again that he just canceled, because he gets to unilaterally write those. So why would you
Oh,
negotiate?
something changed. More people are dying.
Yeah, well,
More new cases. We need masks now.
yeah, and the absolute worst thing is that when we pass the bonding bill, or if the legislature passes it, and we adjourn sine die, which means not until required to come back, the governor can then say, by executive order, I'm going to mail a ballot to every single registered voter for the general election. So and we can't come back for another 30 days. I mean, it's just crazy negotiating with someone that has the ability to write law for anything they want.
So and there has been this huge push, both
So
in Minnesota.
quick question on the adjournment. Is there anything that the Republican Party can do to not adjourn the Senate and the House?
Well, the Republicans in the Senate, since they're the majority, they can choose to not adjourn sine die, and they could just recess for another week. In fact, I'm asking that the Republicans in the Senate not adjourn until we hear back from the courts from our hearing that we had in court on Thursday. I mean, we have a really good shot of the courts coming back and saying that 12.31 is unconstitutional. It's thrown out. Governor's peacetime emergency ends. The threat to that is if we adjourn sine die before that decision comes back and negotiate the bonding bill or whatever, or if the legislature actually goes in and tries to fix that part of law and try to make it constitutional, even if it's a weak version of it, if there's any change to Chapter 12 law, then the courts will come back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you've changed that chapter of law. Now the court case is invalid, and the governor gets to keep his powers." So there's two big outs that the Democrats have. We need to get Republicans on the same wavelength and say, don't change Chapter 12 law, and we shouldn't be negotiating a bonding bill in exchange for giving up some of these executive orders, which he can just reinstate as soon as he signs the bonding bill.
Yeah, I don't have that much faith in the Senate.
Yeah, well, I'll probably be on your show in 2 weeks going, "I told you so." There's so many bad ways, so many bad outcomes. But this election is so important because redistricting happens with the new legislature next year. So they're going to reset. Yeah.
I'm curious, what is the difference between redistricting and gerrymandering?
Redistricting is changing the shape of your district, and gerrymandering is purposely changing it in order to keep Republican districts Republican and Democrat districts Democrat. But call it what you want. Call it what you want.
Okay.
Gerrymandering has a partisan purpose, right?
Okay. All right.
And we know that happened.
And of course, that would never happen in the great state of Minnesota. So we can rest our heads assuredly on our pillow that will never happen. So, okay. So we've got the threat, at least, of this bonding bill. But in listening, it sounds as though the unions are the ones that have the most to gain by the bonding bills. I mean, because you're talking about, in the state of Minnesota being a union state, we're talking about roads and bridges. We're talking about schools. We're talking about work on state buildings. I mean, those will all be union projects. So how does the union not unproportionately benefit from these bonding bills?
They absolutely benefit from them. So I don't have an answer for you.
But what I'm trying to understand is, okay, so many of these unions are dumping money back into the Democrat Party, right?
Yes.
So I just want to understand, what protections do we have as a citizen? What protections do we have that we're not being put on the hook, right? And this debt's being placed on us for years to come, and that money is being turned around and being handed to parties that don't have my best interest at heart. I mean, so what's the solution to that, Jeremy? I know that's a really, really complex question and probably a complex answer, but I have to wonder. I look at on a national level, and I'm not trying to drag you into this, but you look at situations like Black Lives Matter, right? And we had a guy on the show a couple weeks ago saying, yeah, look and try to find a corporate office for Black Lives Matter, or an office of any kind for Black Lives Matter. So these dollars that are going into it, a lot of those dollars are going right back into supporting political candidates. Well, that's a scary situation to me. It's a really scary situation to me, because I'm being taxed. My tax dollars are going to support people, whether I like it or not, that don't have my best interest at heart. So what can we do as people? I don't know the quick answer is to vote, but ultimately, what can we do as citizens to ensure that we're not being put in debt, our children aren't being put in debt, and essentially that money being used to violate our own personal rights and privileges?
Well, I think that we need some reforms on how we do bonding. I think that first of all, we should get back to having single subject bills so that we can vote on all the really important projects. I had a bonding bill request for a project in my district. I had the mayor come up, and this is a wastewater project where they're dumping about 12 million gallons of raw sewage into the Blue Earth River, which goes into the Minnesota River every year because their system is failing. and they came up and this is a very critical project, and we're waiting for 60 projects to be testified to or heard in the committee, and some of these projects are just like new stuff, not essential, not so important to clean water, and those projects are being earmarked ahead of the really important ones. We should actually just go off of a specific formula that looks at all the projects fairly and determines where the greatest need is. That's what should be funded first. Whether we borrow the money or whether we pay cash as we go could also be a different discussion. Like I said, we spend $1.8 billion in debt service payments, the minimum payment due on previous bonding bills. If we didn't bond, we would have that same amount of money to pay cash. And instead of borrowing the money, which requires we go through unions for projects, maybe we could just pay cash for projects and not have to have a requirement that they be union projects. Because down in my area, and probably your area too, you're close to the Dakotas. When you have a project like a bonding project in your area, you probably get all these cars from the Dakotas driving over. You drive by a construction site and I see South Dakota plates on cars all the time. So we're drawing jobs from other states because we're paying so much higher than local wages for these projects because of how they're paid for by the state. So I think we need to look at major reforms on how we're spending money, because some of these projects can add 30 or 40% to the cost of the project just because of how they're financed.
You got to be careful, Jeremy. You're at risk of sounding like a real conservative. So you got to be careful with that. Okay, so there we are. So the main thing that we can do is we can push our own representatives to push reforms. So you say that single bills,
Subject bills, yeah.
single subject bills, as opposed to omnibus.
As opposed to these omnibus bills, or allowing all of the earmarks to get pushed into one big pile. I mean, they literally go around and buy votes, and they say, all right, you've got $2 million for your district. What do you want? Put it in the bill. Then we have to have your vote. And so we shouldn't be buying votes like that. We should be just going off a fair formula. It shouldn't matter if your representative is Republican or Democrat. If your district has a critical need that it, based on all the formulas, says it should be at the top of the list, pour money in the bucket, and it takes care of those projects in that order. That's how we should be doing it fairly.
So I know this is a weird question, but so for these large omnibus bills, how many pages are we talking? 100, 200?
Yeah, it could be 100 to 200 pages. And usually when we get into these types of bills for bonding, we get a big spreadsheet that talks about, all where the money's coming from and which projects it's going to. I wish they'd add district numbers so I could figure out who's getting all this money, right?
Right.
You might see, there's a $2 million for a veterans memorial in this town, and you got to look up, well, whose district is this? But it's frustrating. And you can also see that, like I said, vulnerable Democrats in the House will get major projects for their district, not because it's a priority, but because they're up for re-election and they want to show their reps as being heroes for the re-election.
Wow. Well, I've got a little bit more to go through with you, but before we move on to the next subject at hand, we've got a few super chats we need to get through. Soder, you got those ready?
I'm sorry. Super chats. Yes. Sorry, I was reading the chat here. I got anyway. All right. Up first, we have Anti-Venom from last week. He sent it in at the last minute. Ninja chat. Gov Walker for 2 Australian buckaroos, which I think is like 2 cents in US dollars. Q, slap Soder again. Do it! No, it's not happening again. I don't want that to happen again.
Hold on real quick, just so Jeremy's not sitting here completely clueless, which we should probably leave him that way so he has plausible deniability. But we said, it must have been 2 months ago.
Yes, it was totally we.
It was totally we. We said that once we reached 2,500 subscribers, which we've soared past that at this point, 2,500 subscribers, that we were going to. Have you seen these Russian slap competitions?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you're missing out, buddy. You're missing out, buddy. So essentially, they stand at a table across from each other. They put powder on their hands and they just reach back and they slap a guy. Right. The point is to continue slapping until one guy gives up, or you knock him out, which does happen from time to time. And so I told the people that once we reached 2,500, that Soder and I were going to have a slapping competition.
He admits it.
I said, but he agreed. Okay, so he was a willing participant, and so this last what was that, Friday, Soder?
Friday. Friday.
We went out to our good friend Nicholas Ricada. Went out to his place and we had our slapping competition. So we went 2 rounds and so we just posted that video up. So they're asking me to slap Soder again, but I don't know. That's probably gonna. What do you think, Soder? 5,000?
No, no, not 5,000. Not 25,000. No, I might consider 1 million subscribers.
Okay, well, hey, that we can do that. So at 1 million subs, but if we 1 million subs, though, the problem is that it's going to have to be a full-on out deal. So we're going till somebody throws up the white flag.
Oh, those are big words.
Well,
I'm sorry. Did you slap each other, or you're just?
No. We did.
We did. Video during the stream for him.
Yeah. There's a video.
I just went and watched the YouTube videos of the Russian slap competitions, and that is pretty crazy. I can't believe that you don't flinch when it's coming at you, because you know it's coming. And then some of those were slaps, but some of them were like smacking the ear, and they got a little deep into the head there.
So the rules say that you can't slap the ear or the neck. That's why they put the powder on their hands, so they can see exactly where the slap was. And if they do, then there's a penalty there or whatnot. But you don't want to blow out anybody's eardrum. You don't want to kill anybody by a chop to the carotid artery. It's I mean, slapping somebody in the neck is almost as bad as kneeling on their neck. But sorry, too soon. I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, you don't want to do that. We've learned that's not a good thing. But it was a clean slap battle. I'm not sure who won. I suppose that's up for the people to decide.
I think I lost. That seems to be the I don't know, the majority of people who say who won and who lost. I lost. Okay, well,
Jeremy, when you get a chance, you'll have to check it out and let us know your opinion. You are a man of honor, so I'm sure you can tell us who you think won it. So, but okay, we got a few more super chats to get through before
we got a couple more here.
All right.
Automotive for $5. I'll admit it, Soder made a stronger slap showing than I was expecting. Well, thanks, I guess. And finally, Gov Walker for 2 Australian cents. My dead grandmother can slap harder than Soder.
Oh, man. That's
brutal. Absolutely brutal.
You know what? He might have had a strong Italian grandmother. You just never know. So, you know what? It's not no shame in coming second to grandma. So now she's dead. Yeah, I don't know. And Gov Walker is from Australia. So, man, them Aussie women are tough. So, no shame in coming in second to a strong Aussie.
I don't know. I've heard some stories of some soft Australians. So
No, that's only
and
the
they
dude.
did come
That's
up with
only the
that
guys.
whole what was that mermaid series that came out a number of years ago? I forget, H2O or something.
Oh, he just said his grandma
Really
was English Aboriginal Australian. So I wouldn't even get in a slapping competition with her.
Ugh.
Yeah. Have you seen Aborigines? Holy
They got big
smokes,
hands.
man. Not only big hands, man, they're ripped. Absolutely ripped. I mean, it's yeah.
Oh,
No
no,
thanks.
I'm glad you're not Aboriginal.
You don't know that.
I'm pretty sure you're not, but we just got a new super chat. Steve Shitty for $2. Q didn't put his full hand into it.
Oh, you know, it's the difference is I actually like Soder. So and I can't lie to you.
What I'm just watching the video now. How come you guys didn't show us? You know, like you keep on switching sides, so we can't actually see the contact with the face.
So you can see the face. You can see the.
We'll have to go a third round and then we can do that. But let me say
1
this:
million subscribers.
at 1 million subscribers.
That is not an endorsement or an agreement to do it. I said might. I will.
Jeremy,
I will
you heard
hold
it.
to that.
You heard it. Okay, so
yeah, he heard might.
So let me say, slapping another grown man from another grown man is not nearly as easy as what you would think. I thought, yeah, I'm just gonna slap the taste out of his mouth, no problem. But when you reach back, especially when you like the person, you just reach out and slap somebody just for no reason whatsoever. It's a little tough. I can't lie, it's a little tough. But the first one I went a little easy because he was there under protest. He really was, and he made it very clear. I had nothing to do with this. This was not my idea. I'll be a good sport, but this was not my idea. This is all you. And so I went a little easy on him the first time, and then I slapped him, and he said, "What? That's it? What was that?" And I was like, "Okay, all right, we're gonna go all in on this." So the second one had a little bit more authority.
We were only gonna do one, so why were you holding back?
Because I didn't want to send you into a convulsion. I would have had a whole lot of explaining to Diet Soder, your wife. Yeah, that would mini Soder. That wouldn't have been too good. So, but yeah, so it was a lot of fun. So, all right. So moving on to the next subject at hand.
Oh, we did get 2 new super chats during that.
Let's just hold off real quick for a second. Let's get back into this real quick. So, so businesses are back open. There has been some talk of doing away or of going back into a stay-at-home order or bringing that back. Have you heard any of that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly always a threat that he can, and it is a threat that he can shut things down again. That he could say bars and restaurants can no longer serve. He can, turn his knobs down, as he says. So yeah, it's a very real threat. And of course, as we get closer to the fall, where we normally have seasonal flu outbreaks, when the seasonal flu comes back again, and it could be worse this year than normal years, combined with the threat of COVID, yeah, they could start shutting bars and restaurants down and shutting retail stores down again, churches, whatever, to infringe on our civil liberties.
Wow. So what's again, I guess I'd love to have you back on after this hearing. I want to keep track of what's going on with this lawsuit, because this isn't just Minnesota. It's not just you guys. I'm sure that whatever happens with y'all will also be followed by other states as well.
Well, actually, we're following because there's 11 other states that have found their governor's actions to be unconstitutional. So we're actually using some of the same arguments other states are using. and it wouldn't be unique if we win this lawsuit.
So how does your argument differ from, say, Wisconsin, that just overturned their governor's executive orders?
Yeah, well, I think in Wisconsin there was an issue, and I don't know exactly the chapter of law, but they were having some state agencies doing the rulemaking instead of the governor.
Okay.
But yeah, it was basically the court found what he was doing was unconstitutional, and the entire state reopened. But in the 11 states that have found the governor's executive actions unconstitutional, 10 of them had the legislative veto provision challenged. And so that's what, one of the strongest arguments out there, that the Supreme Court has found is unconstitutional, shouldn't be allowed. And then the non-delegation doctrine violation has been used in other cases too. So I think we have a really strong case, and I hope to hear back from the judge in the next 7 to 10 days. He should rule, as long as we don't mess with the underlying law.
Well, could you try to make it a point to let's touch base and have you come back out after this
Sure.
ruling comes down, regardless of how it comes down? I'd love to hear, number one, why it happened the way it happened, whether it's a victory for us or whether it's a defeat. I would definitely like to know the rationale behind it, and it's just great to see our representatives actually taking a stand. I've for a very long time, and even to this day, I'd shudder to call myself a Republican. I really do. I shudder to call myself a Republican. In fact, I consider myself to be more independent. I'm a conservative, very much so. I'm a conservative, but at this point, I'm definitely more of a libertarian than a small L libertarian, anyway, than anything. I get tired of losing, man. I get tired of losing, and so many Republicans, and please don't take this the wrong way, because I have to realize that everyone's different. But God, so many Republicans are just afraid to fight, man. They're afraid to get in the trenches. They're afraid to just roll up their sleeves and just fight. And I understand that we want to have a gentlemanly battle, but we're not fighting with gentlemen, right? I mean, this is guerrilla warfare. I mean, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I guess I kind of do, because we're dealing with people who don't have our best interests at heart. They have an agenda, and they don't care how many people they hurt in order to get to their agenda. And that is, number one, division of the people, and number two, it is to get the vote. And that's all it is. And I feel like every last one of these decisions comes down to, how do we position ourselves best to get the vote in November. And that's what it feels like.
And that's what people struggle with, is because as Republicans, we believe in protecting the minority voice. And we don't believe it should be just ruled by majority. Just because majority of people think or want one thing doesn't mean that we should infringe on the rights and the civil liberties of the minority of the population. And so, but when you're running for re-election, you do need a majority of the people to support your stance. And so that's where, when the governor, shut the state down, within days, there were just 4 of us that were, challenging this and brought forward a resolution to end the peacetime emergency. We only got 15 Republicans. There wasn't even a majority. It was clearly the majority of Minnesotans said, let's just let the governor have these powers. I'm willing to stay home and be locked in my home. They were giving up their civil liberties right away. And we worked on it, and we're trying messaging, and knowing it's unpopular. But, we knew we were going to be on the right side of things, because people don't give up their civil liberties like this. They should not. And so fighting for this and being principled and going back to the Constitution and remembering that we can't just pass laws because we want them. We have to pass only stuff that's constitutional. And that's what it comes back to. Wow. So you're right. People are afraid to take a stand and fight, but we need more people to. We started out with 4 lawmakers on the lawsuit, and now we have 13 lawmakers, including some in the Senate. So we hope to keep this going and add more lawmakers to it.
Well, please tell me ours is on there. Lang involved?
I need to double check. I think I know we were talking to him. You should know this. Yeah. I know Jensen. No, I think it's just Jensen and Goggin in the Senate. But Lang, I know Lang might watch all the time every Sunday. If you're watching and you're on here, I'm sorry, but you should join us.
Come on, man. You need to do it. Come on. You're up for election.
I'm
Miller's on, so
sending him a message right now. Yeah, no, that is good. I think that it's important to, at the end of the day, I want lawmakers that will pick a side. Pick a side. And I've had this discussion with Tim Miller. And there's a lot of different feelings as far as, how do you vote as a legislator? And many people that I talk to, they vote their conscience, number one. They vote their constituency, number two, and they vote their caucus, number three. I can't tell you how wholeheartedly I disagree with that.
Hang on a second. There's not many people that vote in that order. I think Representative Miller does.
I'm not.
I think most legislators in St. Paul vote with their caucus, number one.
Yeah, and you know what? And I didn't want to say how he voted, but okay, so yeah, we'll go with that. And Tim and I love the guy, absolutely love the guy. I have nothing but respect for Tim. And we have private conversations where we'll be very very frank with each other, but no respect loss. I just personally believe that you are there as a representative to vote your constituents first. At the end of the day, you are there to vote them first. And if you have properly sold yourself to the people and you've properly represented yourself to the people, there should be very few situations where your constituency and your conscience are at odds.
Okay.
Theoretically.
But hang on. When you say vote your constituency, that translates into I'm going to vote the way that I think I need to vote to get reelected.
Yeah, see, that's
what it translates into.
That's not what I'm. That's and I if that's the way it's taken, then yes, I would say I disagree with that. Okay, but the people that have voted you in, the people who have made you their representative, they've said, I don't have time to go to St. Paul. I don't have a seat. I don't have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. I want to hire you to go and speak on my behalf. I trust you. I trust that you are going to go to St. Paul, that you are going to go to Washington, and you are going to let the people know how I feel here in central Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm. I feel that in that situation, you have a duty as a representative to make my voice heard as someone who voted for you, to make my voice heard because I don't have a voice alone, right? And so that's how I feel about it.
I just need to make sure that you also include people who didn't vote for you, because you need to represent everybody. And what my focus on in being in St. Paul, and I probably do this better than most, is that I try to bring the legislature directly to the people by live streaming floor debates and committee meetings. And then when I'm on the House floor, I'm streaming the House floor debate to Facebook. And then I'm on there messaging with people, explaining what this procedural vote is doing, what it means, why I'm voting this way, and like live bringing in the voice of people who are actively engaged in politics. And that's what I do differently, but it more directly reflects what people want in the district. So yes, I'm representing constituents first, but there's so much fear in St. Paul about re-elections that people, that's where the caucus comes in and says, you need to vote this way, or we're not going to help you with your re-election campaign. That's where we get lobbyist influence and all this terrible influence that controls legislation. People need to explain to the voters how they're going to vote. I say, hey, I vote with the Constitution. I vote for civil liberties. I vote for freedom and less government. And that's my platform. And so then that's where conscience goes up first, where you say, this is how I'm going to vote. And this is my principles. And I will continue to explain my votes to people all day long. And I will bring them the legislative votes so they can see the important votes right there in their Facebook feed and ask me questions as we're going. But I think when you start talking about putting your elections first, or just trying to go off the whim of a small minority of people that start emailing you and pestering you about getting something through, you should be consistent and principled and explain your votes. But
and I guess what I'm coming from is exactly what you said. Vote the way that you presented yourself. Vote your platform. Vote when you asked me for your vote, and figuratively speaking, when you asked me for your vote and you stood up on that stage and you said, "This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what I want. This is what I want for our community. This is how I'm going to vote." Do it.
Yeah. Stick with it and be consistent.
Stick with it. Be consistent. Do it. And regardless of anything else, I think that I can't think of a time where voting your constituency or keeping your promise to your constituents, I should say, should ever violate conscience. I'm not sure where that comes from.
Well, let's say this. The move over law. Remember that bill that was passed? I think it was Jasinski's bill in the Senate. If you're driving the speed limit, the maximum allowable speed under law, and you're in the left lane, you can be given a ticket, right? I mean, we all know this. We speed once in a while, and it's frustrating because the guy in the right lane's going 65, and the guy in the left lane's going 67, and you're driving 72 and a 65. Yeah, it's frustrating. The guy isn't going to move over, but it shouldn't be illegal. Right? So they said, hey, here's a great re-election bill. I'm going to make everybody move over or they're getting a ticket, right? And so the majority of people might want that bill. But the principle is, hey, less government. We shouldn't have a primary offense. We're pulling somebody over, smelling what's in their car, or we're looking in their car and seeing what else they have. We shouldn't be creating more primary offenses out there to get more people in trouble when they were not violating the law. They were violating the law, but they were going the speed limit, right? And so we shouldn't have had that law. That was popular among a lot of people. Yeah. I voted against it, but that's the constituency might want it.
Yeah. I'm going to throw you under the bus real quick, Jeremy. How'd you vote on the hands-free law?
I was opposed to it because it was poorly written law. Actually, it makes wearing a smartwatch illegal while driving. We debated on the House floor. I talked to the head of the state patrol. He said, well, I know it's illegal, but we're not going to enforce that now. It was a poorly written bill.
Oh man. Well, I tell you what, I appreciate leaders like you. I really do. And I appreciate how much you have brought us into the process. I definitely follow you on your social media platforms. It's just really neat to have a look behind the curtain. It can be frustrating at times, it can be very frustrating at times, but it's great to be able to see the sausage being made, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Sometimes that's necessary. I want to let you go because I know you've got a long week in front of you, but been a lot of concern and a lot of talk about this mail-in ballot system. First off, how do you stand on that? And secondly, what are the dangers of mail-in ballots?
Well, for the record, I've lived in a mail-in ballot district for probably 12 years. So I used to go into Lake Crystal, a few miles away from me, and do my voting and for my township, and they got rid of it. And all of a sudden, every single registered voter in my township received a ballot mailed to us 45 days before the election, including for the primary. So honestly, convenient to be able to look up people on the ballot. I can actually make really informed decisions looking for, voting for judges, but everybody has that option to request one. The problem is if I move and somebody else, I move out of state and somebody buys my house, they may get my ballots in the mail. And there's a major, opportunity for fraud with mail-in ballots, because it takes quite a nerve for somebody to go in and pose as someone else to vote at the ballot box. But if you can get mail-in ballots sent to not even every registered voter, every name and address that appears on the voter registry, and we don't do a lot of cleanup on that list. So
Right.
it is people move around, especially in the cities. People move more often than out in the country here, and there's a high propensity of fraud. That's
And
a big concern.
and you said 45 days. So what happens if a person dies in that period of time?
Oh, I don't know. It might take months for that death to be reported from DHS to the Secretary of State. They may only update their voter registry, twice a year. I don't know what the time period is. The same with felons. When you commit a felony and you lose your right to vote, that isn't updated, very quickly either. So, yeah, I don't. That's a good point, and that's what we would love to go back to, or would love to go to voter ID. So you would really have secure elections. But I'm fearful that we're going to automatically send everybody a ballot this general election, and it's going to have a lot of voter fraud.
Yeah. I guess I don't understand why. I get the reason that they're giving. I get that. But typically elections take place during the height of flu season, right? So why now? Why are we looking to, because at some point COVID is going to be over, right? And the problem I have with giving power to, giving power to you people, as in elected officials, is that no matter how much power we give, very rarely do we ever see that power come back to the people, right? So essentially, if we're going to make the concession for mail-in ballots this year, we can just assume that mail-in ballots will be here until the cows come home, right? I don't see us going back to voting as we know it after COVID. I just don't. Now, if you see that differently, tell me. But
well, I'd love to see, in-person ballot, requirements. One of the frustrations with mail-in ballots, and I have 56 precincts in my House district, and 33 of them are mail-in ballot only under current law. They're allowed. And the problem is if you live in a mail-in ballot district in the area, or mail-in ballot town in my district, and you're not registered, to say you moved there, and it's coming up an election, and you're like, hey, I didn't get a mail-in ballot. They're talking to their neighbors. Oh, you have to go to your county seat to register to vote. Well, you can't go on election day to your local ballot, your balloting office, because it's no longer in town, and you have to drive 45 minutes away to the county seat to register to vote, or vote, and get all that done. It's a long distance traveling for people, especially when you get into some of these counties where they may work in the opposite direction, across the county line. So they're going to a town that they don't normally go to. And yes, you can do stuff through the Secretary of State's website where you can go register online and have something sent to you and fill out paperwork, but that takes time. And there's a lot, it's not very convenient for voter registration.
Well, if you can do all that, you can get a voter ID, right?
Well, I'd like to see if we can get voter ID through it, but yeah. So I do have great concerns about the voter fraud with mail-in ballots, especially around, you mentioned deaths. Nursing homes have a huge stack of these mail-in ballots, and there's usually more ballots stacked up than there are residents.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well.
Oh, and then I just have to add to it. There's a lawsuit that just happened where we lost some restrictions on that as well, where you no longer have to sign the outside of the ballot as a witness. So you used to, before you sent in the mail-in ballot, you had to have somebody sign as a witness and put their address down. Now that's no longer required. That's a big concern. Another thing in that lawsuit was that the Secretary of State now says ballots will be counted if they're received up to 2 days past election day. Whereas today they have to be received by, And the problem is now they're saying if you postmark it on election day, it'll still be counted because it could take 2 days to get it. Listen to this. That only occurs in the metro. If you mail a ballot from your farm on election day, it goes to Minneapolis to go because these rural sorting facilities were closed about 10 years ago. Mankato and, in different areas. I think there was 4 or 5 that were closed. So now our mail goes to Minneapolis and is usually postmarked the next day and then takes about 3 days to get back to the district, to your county elections office. So now if you follow the Secretary of State's advertisement, just get it postmarked by election day, rural votes will no longer be counted and metro votes will. So what does that do with Republican and Democrat?
That is... I'm going to start investing in rope futures.
Yeah. So
there should be some people hanging from lampposts for that.
Well, the biggest message
not only
is
shady shit, but shady shit on top of shady shit.
Yeah, I sent Steve Simon a letter. I sent him a letter saying this is a big issue for rural Minnesota. Don't you dare put in that ballot when you mail it out. It's okay to mail it back on election day because you're disenfranchising Republican votes. Basically, he wrote back that he really didn't care. Wasn't a concern, but this is a concern. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So if you live in a mail-in ballot precinct, get your ballots returned now, so they're counted for the primary, and make sure you return them and when you get them in the general election.
Wow. So essentially, they're incentivizing people to maybe do some things that they wouldn't have done previously, but if they wake up the day after the election and realize that or the day before the election and realize that the poll numbers are showing that a candidate I don't like has a real legitimate shot, and they can send in 3 or 4 extra ballots, that could possibly incentivize someone to do something that they wouldn't have done previously.
Yeah, I think that you're right. The day of the election, in close results, that's when you're going to find these boxes of ballots show up the day after the election.
Oh, sure.
They've got 5,000 ballots that they know are 80% their way, and then those, they'll just decide how many more boxes they need to show up magically the day after the election.
I mean, if you're sitting at home and you're watching the exit polls, and you realize, wait a minute, it looks like the candidate I hate is surging or doing better than he polled to do. I work at a nursing home. I've got about 5 or 6 extra ballots here. I'm sure I know how they would vote. That's just ludicrous to me. Absolutely ludicrous to me, especially when we all know Minnesota is a conservative state. If you were to remove the Twin Cities,
you can stop there.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you were to move the Twin Cities, I mean, this state is red as red could be, right? And that's and really, I mean, we could weather Duluth and we could weather Rochester. We could even weather your town of Mankato, right?
Yeah.
We could weather all of that. But sorry, I didn't mean to throw you into that. But we could weather those storms. But with the Twin Cities, that would make it very tough. So it seems a little. It seems a little deliberate to me that it would be written that way, especially when brought to their attention, that they would basically say fly a kite. So that's wow. Well, we need to get involved, and we will get involved. Thank you so much for giving us this information to let us know how we should be getting involved. And I want to know how this lawsuit goes, because we need to be on our toes, because there's a lot. Again, precedence is a weird thing. Once we allow these things to continue, very rarely do we ever get a second chance at getting those things back. So we need to make sure we get it right the first time. So my papa used to say, trouble is easy to find, but hard to get out of. So we're in trouble. And potentially and more. We got a couple more super chats, and then we're gonna let you go, Mr. Munson.
Okay.
All right. Talbot links for $2. Australia. Oi! I think that's a soccer thing, perhaps. Steve Shitty for $2 again. Get Nick and Drex on it. I think that's for slapping.
Yeah.
And finally, Gelth Walker for two Australian dollars that are probably worth 2 cents American. Drex could slap you all in one shot. I have no doubt of that. No doubt at all.
You talk Drex. You talk Drex into doing it. I will. I'm game. So, but we got to be at least 5,000 strong. So, $1 million for Soder, a rematch with Soder, 5,000 for Drex. But you guys got to talk Drex into it. Drex is a pretty boy. You got to remember. So his face is his moneymaker. I don't necessarily know if he'd be willing to go down that road, but if he's
scars, it'll only help him.
Chicks dig scars. Oh, how's your face doing, buddy?
It's doing pretty good. The redness is going away slowly. I contemplated shaving for church today because I didn't really want to explain that, but at the same time, it was looking really unmanageable.
He called me and complaining and saying his neck was red. And I was like, what's new?
Walked into that one. He
did walk into that one. So, all right, y'all. Well, hey, fantastic for having you guys on. This was kind of a short show, but we definitely want to get Mr. Munson on his way so you can go and fight for us tomorrow. Well, I'm sure you got a lot of work to get done otherwise. So thank you for taking time. This was kind of a last minute deal for you, but I feel like we have a better understanding of what's going on and definitely a better understanding of what we need to do and what we need to be looking for. So appreciate that. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you are not currently subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Every subscriber counts to get us to that 1 million, where Soder and I go unlimited rounds in the slapping competition.
Maybe.
No. Jeremy, you heard it. You heard it.
I heard it.
We have a witness. We
have recordings.
No.
Right, I'm
$1 million. It's $1 million
on my PC here.
1 million. So hey, every single subscriber counts. So if you have an account that is a ghost account, be sure to subscribe from that account as well. If your girlfriend has an account, subscribe from that account. If your wife has an account, if your kids have an account, subscribe from that one as well. We will get to this 1 million, and we will go unlimited rounds until somebody drops. So you guys have a fantastic night. Like this video, share it with others. We want to make sure we get the word out. We want to make sure that people know that their civil liberties are under assault, but there are still very good people in the trenches fighting for the people, and we can win this. We will win this, but we need y'all to help us out. So thank you very much. You guys have a fantastic night. Thank you for hearing us out. And Mr. Munson, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Night.